Hello, this is Lisa Friedrichsen, your friendly computer science professor, and in this short screencast we're going to continue our discussion about JavaScript scope. According to w3schools.com, scope determines the accessibility or visibility of variables, meaning can that variable be used in any function? Does it have global visibility, or is it limited to an individual function? If you want a little bit more technical explanation of scope, just type in MDN and then anything that you want about JavaScript, and that will take you to the Mozilla Developer Network definition, which is a little bit more in depth. MDN defines scope as the current context of execution, the context in which values and expressions are visible or can be referenced. In other words, can they be used only in a function, or are they available to all the script? It goes on to explain how scopes can be layered in hierarchies so that if a function is inside of a function, how that works. And that leads to the discussion of closure in JavaScript. But back to the basics here. In my last short screencast about scope, we talked about var, let, and const, and I thought it might be very helpful to see those three in action. I've got a body, of course, with my outer wrapper, where I've made, with an embedded style sheet, the width to be 80% and the left and right margins to be automatic, just so the content's centered on the page. I've also got a header, nav, main, and footer section, but nothing's in the nav and the footer sections yet. In the header section, I've got an H1 element with the title of the website, animal website, and in the main section, I've got an H2, select your favorite animal, and then 3 buttons with an ID of cats BTN, dogs BTN, and cows BTN. Finally, I've got an empty paragraph that is identified as animal para, and we know these ID attributes are extremely important to JavaScript. So let's get down to the JavaScript. I have an embedded script here with 3 declared constants. Now, before the ES6 standard came out, I think it actually came out in 2015, we would be using var all the time. And the difference between var and const is pretty important, because if we use const, then we cannot reassign the value of that variable to anything different. So here I've got constant text that I want to start with. My entire function depends on this text to be exactly the same every time I run the function. And so I don't want that to change. If I made this var, then I could do something like this. Text reassigned to something else, and I don't want that to happen. By making it a const, you prevent that potential problem. As you can see, this constant is assigned to mere text, but look at this. Now this makes a lot of sense to me. If I declare a constant paragraph and I'm pointing to something in the HTML using the getElementById method, we know that all IDs point to unique elements on the page. So if that element is not going to change, then of course I would want to make it a const so that paragraph cannot be reassigned inadvertently later in the script. My third const is actually a node list because I'm using the query selector all method, and I'm getting all the elements in my HTML that are buttons. And so once I save this and refresh my page, I can look at my variables here in my console. My text is exactly what I'd hoped it to be. My paragraph is my ID animal para, which is empty right now. And my buttons are a node list, which is similar to an array of the 3 buttons, and there's their IDs: cats button, dogs button, and cows button. So I've got 3 global const variables, and because I've made them const, I am confident they are not going to be reassigned and changed. To do the event listeners, I decided to use the for each method because it cuts down on our code a little bit, and with only 3 buttons it would not be a big deal to write a separate event listener statement for each of those buttons, but I might have 50 favorite animals down the road. So this statement traverses over each of the buttons and runs this function. And so for each button, I'm adding an event listener that here's the click event. We're going to run the change text function. So if I click cats, I get a baby cat is a kitten is cute, a cat says meow. Dogs, a baby dog is a puppy is cute, a dog says bark. And cows, a baby cow is a calf is cute, a cow says moo. So the reason I have these three buttons and this changing text is to now in my function, in my change text function, demonstrate when we need to use let. We need to use let anytime we anticipate or need value of that variable to change. So I've got 4 variables here, and I've used the let JavaScript keyword on each of them because each of them are going to change. I start out by declaring my changing paragraph text to be an empty string, and then I set it equal to text, which I'm confident, that's my global variable up here, is not going to change because I've declared it with const. Then I let the chosen animal btn be the event target ID. That will pick up the ID of whichever button I've clicked on. So the IDs, as we know, back up in the HTML are cats button, dogs button, and cows button. So I'm going to switch some variable assignments based on that chosen animal ID. So if the chosen animal ID is the cats button, or the dogs button, or the cows button, then I'm going to set these variables to be different things. So I've got the adult variable, the child variable, and the sound variable. And because each of these cases have different values for each of these variables, I had to use the let keyword to declare them. If I had used const, I could not reassign them. So if the variable is going to change, you're going to want to use let. Then at the end, all I do is take the changing paragraph text, which starts out as our standard text, and I replace cat globally and with case insensitivity with whatever the value of the adult variable is. I replace kitten globally and case insensitively with whatever the child variable has. And I replace the word meow both globally and insensitively with whatever the sound variable has. So the way I've written this, we always are replacing this text. That's why I needed the text, the initial text for the changing paragraph, to always start out with the cat information. Now, an interesting thing about let is it doesn't work exactly like var. If I take these let statements and I paste them at the end of my function and save and refresh, we're going to see all kinds of errors happening here because our variables are not defined. So let isn't exactly like var. Let means you have to declare the variables before you use them. And so I don't think that's such a bad thing because it helps us organize our thoughts. Obviously, we have to think about a variable such as adult before we use it later on in our code. So to declare our variables with let before we use them as a discipline is not a bad idea. If I had used var on all these, yes, I could move those variables to the end of the function, and through the hoisting mechanism, this function would still work. Just something to be aware of as you move from var into const and let. In the previous short screencast, let also has the added benefit of having block level scope, which also puts it heads and shoulders above var. Just change my constant text up here, says meow, 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 just to prove that my replacements, dogs, bark, 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 cows, moo, 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 just to show this replace method is working as intended. Thank you.